100 doctors couldn't cure Diego Martinez. The billionaire was dying. Then, a waitress named Carmen touched his shoulder in a Manhattan café. The pain disappeared instantly, completely. "Impossible," said the doctors. But Carmen had a gift that science couldn't explain. The problem? Each time she healed Diego, she grew weaker, and she had a devastating secret that would change everything. Diego Martinez was used to getting everything he wanted. At 42, his financial empire was worth $3 billion, and his name regularly appeared on lists of America's most powerful men. But all his wealth couldn't buy the one thing he desperately needed: healing. For 8 months, he had suffered from a condition that had left the world's best doctors perplexed. Stabbing pains that shot through his entire body without medical explanation, extreme weakness, episodes of sudden fainting. He had spent more than $2 million on consultations from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester to the most exclusive Swiss hospitals. 100 doctors, hundreds of tests, no answers. That Wednesday morning, while crossing Soho on his way to another useless medical appointment, the pain hit him harder than ever. His legs failed him, and he had to lean against the wall of a small cafe called Life is Beautiful. A sweet voice reached him through the fog of pain. A waitress was watching him with genuine concern. She was a woman about 30 years old, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, brown eyes that emanated a strange calm. Carmen, he read the name on her badge. She wore a black apron over a white shirt, and had the delicate hands of someone who had always worked with care. Before he could protest, Carmen gently helped him enter the cafe and made him sit at a corner table. The place was small and cozy, frequented more by neighborhood residents than tourists. She approached to bring him a glass of water. Then she did something unexpected. She delicately placed her hand on Diego's shoulder. Breathe deeply. The moment her hand touched him, Diego felt an incredible sensation. It was as if a warm current spread from the point of contact throughout his body. The stabbing pain that had tormented him for months began to fade, first slowly, then completely. In 30 seconds, he felt better than he had in 8 months. Carmen seemed equally surprised, quickly withdrew her hand and stepped back. In her eyes was something that resembled fear. Diego stood up, realizing that for the first time in months he felt no pain. He took out his wallet and put a $500 bill on the table, asking how it was possible. Carmen nervously took the bill, insisting it had been just a moment of relief and that the pain would return. But Diego knew it wasn't so. As he left the cafe, he felt completely different. Energy had returned. His mind was lucid. His body no longer betrayed him. For the first time in 8 months, he felt alive. The next day, however, the pain began to return slowly at first, then with the same intensity as before. It was as if the effect of Carmen's touch was fading. Diego canceled all his appointments and returned to Life is Beautiful. Carmen was cleaning tables when she saw Diego enter the cafe. Her face contracted in an expression of concern mixed with something else that seemed like resignation. She had imagined he would return. Diego explained that the pain had returned and that he needed her help. Carmen continued cleaning the table with mechanical movements, maintaining that what had happened the day before had been a coincidence. Diego showed her his phone with medical reports from recent months. 100 doctors hadn't even managed to diagnose what he had. She had cured him with a touch. It couldn't be coincidence. Carmen finally looked at him, and Diego saw something in her eyes he hadn't noticed the day before. A deep sadness, as if she carried an invisible weight. She told him he didn't understand. It wasn't a blessing, but a curse. When Diego objected that she had an incredible gift, Carmen laughed bitterly. She explained that when people discovered what she could do, they became obsessed. They wanted her to cure all their problems, all their loved ones. And when she couldn't, when her touch didn't always work, or when she couldn't cure terminal illnesses, they blamed her. The cafe was empty. It was still early for regular customers. Carmen sat heavily in a chair and began to tell her story. She had discovered she had this gift when she was 8 years old. Her grandmother was sick with arthritis. She touched her and the pain disappeared. At first, her parents thought it was a miracle. Then they began taking her to all the sick people in their town in Texas. It worked sometimes, other times it didn't. But people didn't understand. When she couldn't cure someone, they said she wasn't trying hard enough. When her father got cancer and she couldn't save him, she had fled to New York at 18. She had changed her name. She had found this job, thinking she could live a normal life if no one knew about her gift. Diego apologized for seeming insensitive, admitting he wasn't like most wealthy people. Carmen seemed surprised by his humility. Most rich people she had met never apologized. She asked why it was so important to him. He had everything: money, power, success. Diego replied that without health, everything else meant nothing, and there was something about her, something special that went beyond her gift. A moment of silence stretched between them. Then Carmen stood up and approached him. If she helped him again, he had to promise her that this would stay between them. No doctors, no journalists, no one should know. Diego nodded. Carmen hesitated a moment, then put her hand on his shoulder again. Once more, warmth spread through his body and the pain disappeared completely. But this time Diego noticed something more. While his pain disappeared, Carmen paled slightly, as if healing him cost her something. When he asked if she was okay, she lied, but Diego had seen. The gift had a price and she was paying it. In the following days, Diego developed a routine. Every morning he went to Life is Beautiful. He had coffee and Carmen discreetly healed him with a touch. The effects lasted about 24 hours, but each day Diego noticed Carmen seemed more tired. One morning, when only the two of them were in the café, Diego confronted her directly. She was giving him her energy, wasn't she? Carmen was preparing coffee with slower movements than usual. She didn't know exactly how it worked. She only knew that when she healed someone, she felt as if something of her passed to them. Diego told her she had to stop. He couldn't allow her to weaken for him, but Carmen replied, asking him, "What would you do? Go back to consulting another 100 useless doctors." It was a good question. In those days of well-being, Diego had reflected a lot on his life. Before the illness, he had lived only for work, for accumulating wealth and power. He had no family, few true friends, no hobbies or passions outside business. Suddenly he asked what she dreamed of. If she could do anything in life, what would she do? Carmen seemed surprised by the question, but then opened up. She had always dreamed of opening a natural healing center, a place where people could go not for miracles, but to find peace, wellness, a more human approach to healing. When Diego asked why she didn't do it, Carmen laughed bitterly. She was a waitress. Her dreams cost more than she earned in a lifetime. Diego had an idea that hit him like lightning. He would propose a deal to her. He would finance her natural healing center. In return, she would help him find a permanent solution to his illness. Carmen looked at him skeptically, asking what he meant by permanent solution. Diego didn't know yet, but there had to be a way to cure him definitively without her having to sacrifice her energy every day. And if it didn't exist, at least she would have her center, and he would have spent his last months doing something meaningful for the first time in his life. Carmen remained silent for a long moment. Outside the cafe, life in Soho continued at its normal pace. Finally, she accepted, but with conditions. The center shouldn't bear his name, shouldn't be a monument to his ego, and if he thought this made him owner of her or her gift, he was wrong. But there was one last condition. She wanted him to tell her the truth about who he really was. Not the billionaire, not the businessman, but who was Diego Martinez when no one was looking. It was a question no one had ever asked him. And for the first time in years, Diego wasn't sure he knew the answer. He admitted he didn't know, but that maybe it was time he found out. Carmen smiled at him, and it was the first real smile he had seen from her since they met. They had a deal. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. In the following months, Diego discovered a world he had never known. Together with Carmen, he visited alternative medicine centers. He met traditional healers. He studied ancient texts on energy healing, not out of credulity, but to understand if there was a scientific basis behind Carmen's gift. The center project took shape quickly. Diego bought an elegant Art Deco building in the Upper East Side and began renovation. But instead of directing everything from above, he worked side by side with Carmen, listening to her ideas, learning from her years of experience with pain and healing. One day, While planning the layout of treatment rooms, Diego asked if she had thought about studying medicine. Carmen replied she couldn't afford it. And besides, what would she have said during exams? Diego laughed, something he did more and more often lately. Before meeting Carmen, he couldn't remember the last time he had laughed sincerely. He proposed enrolling her in medicine as evening courses, but Carmen gently stopped him. He didn't have to fill every moment of her life with opportunities. Sometimes it was beautiful simply to be. It was a lesson Diego was slowly learning. His whole life had been oriented toward achievement, accumulation, always doing more. Carmen was teaching him the value of the present, of silence, of simplicity. Their initial agreement had become something deeper. They spent hours together, not always talking about the illness or the center, but sharing stories, dreams, fears. One night, while walking along the Hudson River after a day of work at the center, Carmen asked if he missed his family. Diego stopped, confessing he didn't have a real family. Parents dead when he was young, never married, no children. Before getting sick, he had never stopped long enough to think if he missed anything. Carmen nodded as if she understood perfectly. She told him that's why he was sick. The body never lies. When the soul is sick, the body manifests it. He had spent years ignoring everything that made him truly alive, and his body had simply begun to rebel. When Diego asked about her touch, Carmen explained she didn't know exactly how it worked, but she believed that when she touched him, he remembered for a moment what it meant to feel complete. It was a theory no doctor had ever proposed to him, but it made more sense than any medical diagnosis he had received. Suddenly, Diego confessed he thought he had fallen in love with her. The silence that followed was long. Carmen told him he couldn't confuse gratitude with love, but for Diego it wasn't gratitude. It was as if he were seeing the world through her eyes and everything was more alive, more colorful, more real. Carmen asked what would happen when he was cured, when he no longer needed her. Diego didn't know, but he knew he wanted to find out together with her. Carmen looked at him for a long time, then smiled sadly. The center would open in 2 months. They had to finish what they had started. Then they would see. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And for Diego at that moment, it was enough. The opening of the Martinez Center for Natural Wellness was a success beyond all expectations. Carmen had created a place that combined the best of traditional medicine with holistic approaches to healing. It didn't promise miracles, but offered something more valuable: hope and human dignity. Diego watched Carmen as she led the team of therapists, doctors, and counselors they had hired. She was in her element, radiant with a purpose that went beyond herself, and he realized something extraordinary. For weeks, he no longer needed her daily touch. One night, while they were closing the center after a particularly intense day, Diego confessed he hadn't had pain in 2 weeks. Carmen stopped and looked at him attentively, as if evaluating him with medical eyes. She asked how he felt. Diego replied he felt complete for the first time in his life. Carmen smiled, explaining that then the real healing was working. She had never healed his body, only given his spirit time to remember how to heal itself. When Diego asked if that was her gift, Carmen explained she didn't create miraculous healings. She simply reminded people who they really were under all the pain and fear, and now he no longer needed her for that. He had learned to do it alone. But as she spoke, Diego saw something different in her eyes. Not sadness, but a kind of peace, as if she too had found what she was looking for. Suddenly, Diego confessed he had something to tell her. The center wasn't just for her, but for them. He wanted to work there with her, not as an investor, but as part of the team. He wanted to sell his company and dedicate the rest of his life to this work. With her, Carmen looked at him incredulously. He was talking about throwing away billions of dollars, but Diego corrected her. He was talking about investing them in the only thing that had made him truly rich. Love for her, for this work, for the possibility of helping others find what they had found. Carmen started crying, but they were tears of joy. When she asked if he was sure, Diego replied he had never been more sure of anything in his life. She asked him the last question. What if one day she got sick, if her gift stopped working? If she became old and was no longer the woman he had fallen in love with, Diego kissed her sweetly, promising he would be there to remind her who she really was, just as she had done with him. That night, as they walked hand in hand through the streets of Manhattan, Diego realized his healing was complete, not because he no longer felt physical pain, but because he had finally understood what it meant to be alive. 2 years later, the Martinez Center had become a model of excellence recognized throughout America. Diego had sold his company and invested everything in the center, creating a foundation that guaranteed free treatments for those who couldn't afford them. But the real miracle wasn't the healings that occurred at the center, though there were many. The real miracle was the transformation Carmen and Diego had lived through together. One morning, while Carmen prepared breakfast in their apartment above the center, she asked if he remembered the first day they had met. Diego replied he had been convinced he was going to die, and she had saved him with a touch. Carmen smiled, correcting him. He had saved himself. She had only held his hand while he did it. Diego hugged her from behind while she prepared coffee. It was a simple, everyday gesture, but one that gave him more joy than any $1 million deal he had ever closed. He confessed to having discovered that her real gift wasn't her ability to heal with touch, but her ability to see people for what they really were under all their masks. When Carmen asked what his gift was, Diego thought about it. He believed it was the ability to transform dreams into reality, but only now was he learning to dream the right things. That morning, like every morning, they opened the center together. There were patients waiting, some with physical pain, others with wounds of the heart, many simply looking for someone who would really see them. Carmen no longer used her healing gift in the miraculous way she had before. She had learned that real power was in listening, in touching with gentleness, in creating a space where people could remember their own inner strength. And Diego had discovered that his true wealth wasn't the billions he had accumulated, but each day he could spend working alongside Carmen to ease others' pain. That evening, as they watched the sunset from the center's terrace, Carmen asked if he had any regrets. Diego replied he had only one, that it had taken him 42 years to understand that real life begins when you stop living only for yourself. Carmen leaned against his chest, reflecting that maybe it had to be that way. Maybe they both had to go through darkness to appreciate the light. As the lights of Manhattan came on below them, Diego thought about all the doctors he had consulted, all the money he had spent looking for a cure. In the end, healing had come in the simplest way, through the love of a woman who had seen beyond his wealth and touched his soul. And the miracle continued every day, not in grand gestures, but in the small moments of human connection that filled the center. Carmen was right. It wasn't her touch that healed people. It was the reminder of who they really were under all the pain. They exchanged words of love as the sun set over Manhattan. In that moment, Diego knew he was truly healed, not from the disease, but from the empty life he had lived before meeting Carmen. The real miracle had been discovering that the greatest wealth was the heart of a woman who saw the world with eyes of compassion. The physical pain had never returned, but Diego had understood that wasn't the point. The point was that he had learned to live a life worth living every day. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you believe that sometimes the deepest healing doesn't come from the most expensive doctors, but from people who know how to see our soul, if you too believe that true love can heal wounds that medicine can't even diagnose, that each person has a special gift to share with the world, and that true wealth is measured by the positive impact we have on others, leave a like and share this video. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe in natural healing powers? Have you met someone who seemed to have a special gift? Do you think love can really heal what medicine can't explain? Every story of inexplicable healing, of love that transforms, and of people who dedicate their lives to helping others can inspire someone else to look for the most powerful cure of all: authentic human connection. Subscribe for more stories that prove miracles still exist, that love is the most powerful medicine in the world, and that sometimes the most ordinary people hide the most extraordinary gifts. See you in the next video. And remember, the deepest healing often comes when we least expect it, from people who know how to touch not just our body, but our soul.